Hey kids, it is the end of Virtual Wednesday. We are winding down, and I am here to introduce part of the food assignment for next class with the juniors. So the listening assignment seems to be going pretty well. So far, pretty excited by all the things I've seen from you guys, and I hope you had a good time with the playlist. You should be coming to the food journaling either right after the cover assignment or just before it. So hopefully you enjoy the cover assignment as well. For food, obviously we have to do a big change-a-roo on this because it's happening a lot differently than it would have if we were, not in COVID learning. So for food, a few things I want you to consider. One, how derivative American food is of other cultures. Meaning, if you were to sit here and just list all the foods you think of as like quintessentially American, a lot of times you will hit on food that comes from another culture. America's generally known as a melting pot, where people from various and sundry places come together and then kind of form a new version of their old culture. Is our food simply following trend with that? Or is it something else and potentially something not more sinister, but maybe less wholesome? One good example would be pizza. Almost every time we do this lesson with students, pizza comes up as like a very American food, as American as apple pie, right? Pizza is like the American food. You guys actually live in like the pizza epicenter. I mean, outside of New York and New Jersey, they just don't know how to do it. Allegedly, there's a good place in Connecticut. I haven't gone. But pizza frequently comes up as a major American food. And yet, not ours, right? We didn't come up with that idea. And if you were to go to Italy and have pizza in Italy, it's very different. It's much lighter, like actually lighter. It's incredibly thin crust, big bubbles, small sizes, often incorporating greens on top. Like when we were getting pizza when I went to Italy, I was young, I was like your age, I did one of the school trips, and we were all really disappointed by it because it would be very lightly sauced, huge globs of fresh mozzarella, nice arugula. I think back on my time there and I'm like, damn, I didn't appreciate good food when I had access to it because I would love to get my paws on some like very authentic Italian pizza right now. But at the time, I just thought about it like the pizza I had growing up. Breadier, greasier, heavier cheese and sauce. We've done our own spin off of someone else's meal. Same thing with a lot of pasta dishes that come out of Italy. Like if you go over there and eat pasta, it's always homemade, it's fresh, it's not heavy. When I went to France and we had baguette, you could eat French baguette from France every day and not feel like you ate an entire loaf of bread. But here you have like one chunk of French baguette from Panera and you feel like you're dying for an entire day. It's very odd the way that we have adapted food from other places and almost seemingly found a way to make it worse. Like if you look at a traditional French breakfast, it's pretty much bread. You eat baguette with a side of pastry and a little coffee. Welcome to France. It's amazing. But also you don't feel nearly so bogged down. I mean, maybe it's because I'm in my 30s now, but like if I have a full bagel for breakfast, I'm pretty much in a carb coma for the rest of the morning. It's like double the amount of coffee just to get me borderline functioning normal. I'm not saying I don't do it, but like a bagel is much smaller than a loaf of baguette, and I get taken down by it. We also like, our bagels are gigantic. We have bagels this half the size of my head. Not to mention the cream cheese proportions at the one bagel place that we used to go to by my old house. You had to go like light cream cheese, man. Light. Take it down on the cream cheese. And you'd still come across with cream cheese this thick between the bagel slices. I mean, how is one meant to eat something like that? Bagels are also an appropriated piece of food. In other words, like culturally, they're not exactly American. We stole them from other places. I am hard-pressed to think of any food that's purely American. I think the closest we get to is burgers, as close as we can get. And there's food that's very close to that we steal from other places. Even food that you might think of as another culture frequently has an American spin on it. Biggest surprise. Corned beef. You guys, when St. Patrick's Day rolls around, are going to be talking about corned beef. You're going to be having corned beef. There's going to be corned beef on special at the supermarket. Everyone and their mom is going to be having corned beef and cabbage. When you go to Ireland, there is no such thing as corned beef. It does not exist. It is not there. They don't eat it. When we went to Ireland, we did like pretty much from Dublin all the way to Galway back over. So we did the whole southern half. It was really nice. Long drive. They eat a lot of fish. Ireland is really surrounded by water, so you get a lot of fresh fish there, a lot of salmon. So I could eat smoked salmon in every place we stopped in. I didn't, because smoked salmon to me is gross, but like every single place had smoked salmon on a menu, and I don't think any of you, if I were like, name me some Irish foods, you would go smoked salmon, 100%. None of you would go there. Fish stew was another one. I could eat fish stew at any place we stopped in Ireland. And yet here, if I was like, what's like a big Irish food? None of you would go fish stew. You would say corned beef. And it does not exist. The reason that we eat corned beef here for Irish food is when the Irish immigrated. The closest thing that we had to like bacon, because bacon was a cheap cut of meat in Ireland. And they had slightly different cuts of bacon. Like if you get bacon over there, it doesn't look like the belly fat bacon that you get. It's slightly thicker, more like Canadian bacon. It doesn't have the same crisp. It's cut thicker. It has a different fat content. Almost like pork roll and ham. It just has a different overall texture and flavor than what you think of as crispy bacon. But they would frequently eat just bacon, slab bacon with cabbage, slab bacon with cheese on a sandwich, or slab bacon on brown bread as a sandwich. It was meat. It had calories. It had fat, which is calories. You could buy it cheaply and buy a lot of it. So it was their version of bacon, and when they came to the States, they didn't have that same cut. Don't know why. But that's the reasoning behind corned beef, is that it's a large, cheap cut of meat that you could kind of use to feed a big family. Because stereotypes in Irish and big families. Other things to consider with the food of America is that food's this incredibly deep-seated, very related to your sense of smell, way that we remember things. So that a lot of times your memories are very connected to food. So your personal memories and your connection to your country and your family can become very integrated in the type of foods that you eat all the time. It's also easy to get stuck in food ruts where you're always eating the same things on a cycle and you don't ever break out of that cycle, and you find it almost hard to envision that other people have a different eating experience than you. I'd be very interested to see how some of you routinely eat. One thing that actually makes an appearance in research papers every year as one of the topics that students choose is talking about healthier eating, and sometimes talking about food deserts, fresh food deserts, that there is a socioeconomic breakdown to healthy eating habits in America. That's a quantifiable thing. You can actually look at a lot of data that supports that. And students have sometimes kind of broaden their horizons by investigating this and learning more about food in America. The fact that we have a first world country that sees itself as a leader in the world on many fronts, and yet we still have a huge problem feeding our own people, is a thing of interest to me. You would think that we would have more of a system in place for making sure that people eat. One thing that COVID taught us was that as soon as schools shut down, one of the immediate outcries, and we didn't, frankly, as teachers and administrators, we didn't need to be told this. This was more news to the outside world. But they were like, well, if school shut down, some kids won't eat. And we were like, yeah, you guys are coming to this, show already in progress. We knew this. We knew some kids relied on us to eat. I guess some people did not realize how much that some students rely on school for food twice a day. I know this because I used to have like a box of granola bars that I just let kids know was somewhere in my room, and I said, help yourselves. And I had to stop doing it because I went through, I mean, at first it was like 3 granola bar boxes a week, and it got up to like 5 or 6 granola bar boxes a week. As just saying to kids, if you are hungry, please do not hesitate to tell me that you are hungry, and I will get you a granola bar. Eventually, I just couldn't support the habit anymore. Although, I will tell you, if you are in school with me and you are hungry, please let me know. I will make sure you get fed. I will never let one of you go hungry. I'll give you my own lunch before I let you go hungry. And I have given students my lunch so that they don't go hungry. In thinking about food in America, I think this is a perfect conversation for you guys to have with your families too. What do you see as food that is kind of central or important to your family unit, to maybe your immediate community? We talk about family values as part of our unit this year. And one of the whole units is American family. And this is one of those things that will be so desperately integrated into that conversation. How does your family sort of come together? How do you celebrate? What are some of the hallmarks of family for you? If you think about things that you do every day, are they not heavily related to food and family? If you had to teach about American culture to, I always say like a Martian, if you were teaching someone like this is what America's about, what would you feed them? Because one of the first instincts we have as people is to eat. Like a baby under a year old cannot actually be spoiled because they have no ability to track that their crying does anything. Like they don't realize that when they cry, you come to them. They realize that, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I'm wet. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. Cry. That's it. Crying is just a response that they have to an immediate physical need of theirs. They don't have psychological associations with it for the first year of their life. They just cry because they need to, and then they expect those needs addressed. After a year, they can start realizing that when they cry, mommy comes. Therefore, they will start crying when they don't need anything. They just want mommy. It's an interesting thing as a parent, too, because you have to start looking at this very small human and going, are they playing me? I think they're playing me. You don't need anything. Why are you doing this? And my 4-year-old has also frequently learned that if she's just trying to manipulate something, she can go, Mommy, I'm hungry. And it's like a very deep-seated like need for me to go, well, what can I feed you? I like to feed her. I like to feed people. We used to, some of you may remember Mr. Clark. He used to work here. And Mr. Clark was my bosom buddy. We were hired on the same day, and he was the Garth to my Wayne. We were besticles. We continue to talk about how he's my brother from another mother. I haven't, just because he's in Seattle does not mean Mr. Clark and I no longer co-teach, because I feel like he half does everything with me. But when Mr. Clark was here and he was like the token male of the English department, whenever we had celebrations and we brought in food, there would be a weird way in which all the women who especially were mothers would kind of sit here like this and like wait for him to come to like the food table. And we'd be like, Billy, you hungry? And then we'd watch him load up his plate and we would just kind of watch him eat. And even one of us at one point went, I don't know why, but this makes me so happy. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, you're such a good eater. It's like a very maternal thing to like, I want you to eat. I want you to be a good eater. I want to make sure you're fed. As you think about food in America, I also want you to think about how associated it is with brands. Materialism will come up a lot in our future conversations, especially when we get to Great Gatsby. Many of you will look at materialism in some form in your research papers. So think about how we've managed to brand food. One thing I talked about was McDonald's. This is the worst coffee I've ever had, by the way. It was cheap and gross. But like how we've managed to make food into something that you associate with a brand and therefore pay for. A lot of students over the past few years have looked into organic food or GMOs just to educate themselves and learn more about the topic. That's a perfectly fair reason to choose a research paper or topic. Hey, I don't know really what the whole GMO thing is about. Maybe I should learn about it. Research paper. In the meantime, please go through your food journal. There are very few ways to do this wrong. One way would be to leave questions blank unless the question is, did you go to another country? I have noticed in other countries, because I've been to quite a few at this point, our food does not meet the same standards that other countries' foods do. In particular, chocolate. So bless the one student last year who brought me chocolate back from France after this conversation. In France, the reason that chocolate is really good from England, from France, from other places, is that there are bare minimums put in place for the percentage of cocoa mandatory inside the chocolate. So do yourself a favor. Go to World Market, or there's a place called Cameroons down in Toms River /Brick, where they have imported European chocolate. It has to be imported from Europe. It's always expensive. You pay an arm and a leg for it, but darn is it worth it. So it's the same companies like Mars, but here they put out something like a Hershey bar. You cannot buy Hershey in England. You buy Cadbury. In France, you don't buy Hershey. You can't. It doesn't meet the basic requirements of chocolate in other countries. I forget what the precise percentage is, but I think it's something in the neighborhood of like 50 to 60% of the chocolate bar must contain cocoa for it to be considered chocolate and therefore sold as chocolate in other countries. Whereas here we're like, 20% will do you. So if you look at the percentage of chocolate versus sugar and milk and other sweet preservatives in our chocolate and candy, the percentage of sugar is much higher. So like I'm not much of a chocolate eater here in the States, but when I go to like England and France, I go to like a candy counter and I'm just like, we are bringing it with us. It comes home. Flake in particular, if you were to hunt down Flake, it is this aerated milky chocolate bar, and they're smaller. They're like that big. Flake is one of the most delicious things I've ever had in my life. I've gone through some extreme lengths to get Flake in the States, and I've paid a lot of money to take it home with me. It tastes better, and it doesn't taste as sweet. You don't get that weird, like, my mouth is coated in sugar feeling that makes you want to shut down. When I have too much chocolate here, it hurts my stomach, it hurts my head, it makes my teeth feel sore and sharp. In England and in France, you can pretty much have chocolate all day and not feel that way. There's sugar in it. I'm not saying there's not sugar in it. But also when you flip the labels on the food over there, you can usually read them. I mean, granted, you have to be able to speak French to read theirs, but it was stuff like, this contains milk, sugar, and chocolate, as opposed to this contains stuff, a lot of preservatives. We just have different rules about it. There's rules about like what you can sell here versus there, that just make it totally different. If you have never experienced that, it's very weird. In other countries, like, sometimes you have to pay for water because their tap water is not safe. You guys live in a county where you pretty much have been able to drink tap water your whole lives. Like, you don't always appreciate how really cool that is until you go places where they're like, do not touch tap water. You wash hands with it. We don't drink it. But also sodas and stuff are much smaller. They're not considered like, you don't like get a soda with a free refill at your meal. You're given water, or you can pay for bottled water. But like that, you're not, it's not assumed that you're getting a drink, and it's certainly not assumed that you're getting free refills, and the drinks are not this big. Like, the drinks are usually this big. Coffees, teas, all of it. The portion sizes are much smaller. And they eat at different times. Their bigger meals are all during the day, usually lunch. Culturally, much different in Europe. So if you go to Europe, breakfast is kind of small, you go to work, but everyone takes a big lunch break from work. You go and you have lunch, and it's kind of expected you take a long time, particularly France and Eastern Europe. They were like, we're American. You tell them you're American when you go because they'll know to treat you a little differently. Like, you're going to go and you're going to want your lunch in, out, done, paid for in an hour. Whereas they're looking to take potentially 2, even 3 hours of like, just we're having a meal here. Maybe you can say, oh, it's a working lunch, so I have to get back to work. But they're not busy. They're not shoveling food in their mouths so they can go back to work. And in the evening, they have late meals. They don't eat their dinner until like 7, 8 o'clock. And then you're expected to just take your time, sit, socialize. In France, they still smoke. So you're smoking, you're having a glass of wine, we're taking a while. Everyone's just, why is everyone rushing? They see us as a very rapid culture. We eat on the move. You can't really go and eat on the move in Europe nearly as easily as here. England, much more so than other places, but like they see us as rushing through our meals and also overeating. Like we managed to get a muffin 20 times the size it should be and shovel it in our mouths while we're driving. And they would say, you have to sit and eat. You have to sit and eat. Take your time, eat. They see eating as very social. You eat with other people. Therefore, you take your time because the point of the meal is not to inhale the meal. The point of the meal is to talk to the people you're with. That's why we sit outside. We have heaters for the winter. Do you want to everyone just get wine for the table? We're all going to have wine at the table because we're going to sit and have our wine and our cheese and we're just going to sit and talk. How was your day? And that's why the meals can take upwards of 3 hours. We can barely sit through a 3-hour movie without, as Americans, going, well, it was long, so I don't know. Maybe we'll only see it once. Consider that. This was a slightly longer intro. However, I know some of you are just missing out on that cultural experience of going to other countries. Therefore, I provided it for you. If you have any questions, do let me know. And do be specific about them, especially technical ones. Have a good one.